foster, kinship, adoption. Welcome to CareCast, the podcast for anyone called to care. Whether you're navigating kinship care, stepping into foster care, or walking through the joys and complexities of adoption, you're in the right place. Encouragement, real talk, and lasting hope. This is a space to be encouraged, inspired, and reminded that you're never alone. Each week, we bring real stories from real people, caregivers, experts, and those who've walked this journey firsthand. Because when we hold their stories with compassion, courage, and community, we all grow stronger. My name is Nancy Weinstein, and I'm your host. Let me introduce you to the cast for today. Executive Director, Lanny Barnes. And Hello. Thanks for being here. And also, our Deputy Executive Director, Logan Mabe.
How's it going?
Happy to have you here. Thank you, guys. So I just want to jump in, but I think you're going to start us off, aren't you?
Am I? I think I will. Can we just celebrate really quick?
Yes.
We've been talking about doing this podcast for over a year. Because what would happen, I would be talking to Nancy about something at work, and all of a sudden I would go, Brother Mabe, Pastor Logan is calling right now, patching him in. And I would just joke around and say, welcome to the podcast. We have Logan Mabe and Nancy Weinstein on the call. And we've been joking kind of about that.
But those phone calls where you're talking to one of us, and it has happened a lot. So it's kind of fun that you patch us in.
And it's interesting because now we're going to get into Pastor Logan's story too, is because we've all fostered and experienced adoption as well. A lot of times, yes, we are talking about work, but sometimes it's the stuff of like, oh my gosh, this is what we're facing right now. And how can I help my child at this? And what that began was that need for community, right? We're always talking about community here at R225, how we believe that every child deserves a caring community. And but those calls were not only funny, uplifting, inspiring, all the above. And welcome 2025.
Yeah, they were practice runs for this moment. So if we do a bad job, we needed more phone calls. But if we do a fantastic job, it's because those phone calls were preparation for even last night. What nobody here knows is last night we're going through in preparation for this. And again, here is Nancy and Lanny and myself finding ourselves patched in on a phone call like we're 15 in the 2000s on a three-way phone call, which I didn't even know you could do anymore. Except for, I don't know when we found out we could do that, but we started doing it. It was good. It was fun.
It was good. All right, so let's start with Logan.
Yeah.
All right. Logan, tell us a little bit about what brought you to fostering and what your story is.
Yeah, I think as a pastor, I want to start with a passage of scripture. It's a life verse of mine that I think is so relevant to this conversation and how God shaped my story and our story as a family. But Genesis 50 verse 20 says, "But you meant it evil against me, but God meant it for good, that many people might be saved." And without the context of that, it's the story at the end of Joseph's life. And if you go back and read the story of Joseph, it's significant because there are very few people in Scripture that we see as much of a person's life like we do of Joseph. And it has ups and downs that has so many moments in it. But at the end of it all, God uses all of these things for good. And I think one of the things that God has shown me is all of my life was a preparation for this moment, the bad and the good. And while God didn't cause those bad things, he allowed them so that many people might be saved. And that's a metaphorical sense in that we have got to foster 12 different children over a period of 10 years. We're on this podcast right now, the CareCast. We've had different moments in life where we're speaking to people who are going through and been through some of the things that we have now experienced, and so much more that we'll talk about here in a second. But my name's Logan Mabe. I'm the Deputy Executive Director of Restoration 225 and pastor at church in Chula Vista. And so many amazing things have happened, but also that started with so many hard things. And so just beginning our journey, I grew up in Mansfield, Ohio. Okay. Shout out Mansfield. Nobody knows where that's in, or nobody knows where that's at unless you're from Mansfield. Fun fact, they filmed Shawshank Redemption there. So if you've seen Shawshank Redemption, you've seen Mansfield.
That's where you grew
like
up.
All of it. That's where I grew up.
And then there's the thing that people from Ohio always do. Whenever I'm going to a conference, Like they always go OH.
Ayo!
Yeah, like it's a thing.
That's Ohio because our pro sports teams, we lack in that department. So our college football team, the Ohio State Buckeyes, national champs right now.
They are.
That's something that we can all celebrate together. So I grew up in Mansfield, Ohio, to two young teenage parents who are not walking with the Lord. And so that involved a lot of different complexities for us. And as I grew up as a young, angry kid. We didn't have a lot of money, but thank the Lord, God brought my grandparents in our life to help us along the way through many seasons. As I got older, I found myself moving in with my grandparents, and that also had some complexities to it. My grandmother is one of the kindest people that I know in the entire world, and not only took me in and my siblings at different points to live with them, but cousins and friends. I had friends in different seasons that actually lived with us in our home. And so before I knew anything about foster care or families in need, I was a family in need. We talk about kinship on this podcast, and I said later on that I was a kinship kid before I knew what kinship was.
Right.
And so going back to Genesis and how that ties in, some of our hardest moments, some of our greatest sufferings are platforms or springboards for the things that God is going to do later in our lives. And so not only was it my family that stepped into our story, but I had a neighbor that stepped into my story, a large African-American man named Tony and his wife, Tina. And also it was the church. And so you take that concoction of events, and here we are, from a young kid to a grown man and a family, and that was part of the early part of my story that brought us to today.
Who was most influential that you're bringing up your grandmother and a neighbor? How were they influential into your life, and how did they change the trajectory of your life?
Yeah, I think it was one moment at a time. I don't think in the early stages of my life that I recognized how impactful or how important they were for me and my story, my development. But as I got older, I could look back and see now. So early on, my grandparents' house was a safe place for us. There was always a meal. There was always a hug. My grandmother has never met a person that she hasn't hugged. And so if you walked into her house right now, you would just get a hug. And it was something that she grew up believing that people needed hugs. And Tony was a next door neighbor that saw some young kids running around the neighborhood with not a lot of supervision, not a father figure in sight, and began to say, hey, come over and mow my yard. Hey, let me help you with this. In fact, at one point, Tony already had grown kids, but he bought a basketball hoop and put it in his driveway so that we could go play safely on his driveway rather than putting our basketball hoop in the streets and having to stop every time traffic came through. He probably was actually doing that more for the neighborhood than for us as kids, but also it benefited us too.
And just that one small act, like you're talking about that today, however many years forward, and how that, it was just an act of generosity on his part, right?
Yeah. Tony was not somebody who was involved in the local church. He just saw me, and he saw some of the other neighborhood kids, and he did something about it. I could talk on and on and on, and I will go through kind of the storyline of these different people that were involved in me to shape me to what we have done. But Tony bought every candy bar every season that we were selling them for our school, and then would give them back to me, and that's why I was a chubby kid. True story. 4th through 8th grade, there's no pictures of me anywhere. I've burned them all. I'm just kidding.
Oh,
no,
my
I'm just
word.
kidding. I'm just kidding. But I was a chubby kid with a mustache. And so, true story, side story. I went in 9th grade, Mr. Turner's 9th grade class, and there was a girl that I kind of liked at the time.
Okay.
And she turned around and she said, "Are you new here?" And I said, "No, we've been in class all through junior high."
Oh, look.
That is how much I changed from junior high to high school. I actually was voted most changed since junior high, my senior year.
That was a category.
Yeah, it was a category.
Mm-hmm.
Did you just make that category up right now?
No,
Oh, okay.
that's true. If you go back and look at my yearbook, you're going to see it.
Okay.
You're going to see it.
Okay.
We're going to have to show that.
We might need that yearbook.
Yeah, we might need it.
Yeah.
Okay, but keep going.
So Tony saw us in so many moments and was critical to my life. And I think that's so important for our listeners to hear too, because we often get overwhelmed with what can I do? And as you said, Nancy, it's the small acts. It's starting with seeing someone in a neighborhood. Yes. And I think everywhere that we live, there are people all around us that we can move so quickly past that we miss, but could use our presence. They can use our encouragement. Tony showed up at basketball games when my parents couldn't be there. Tony let me work off basketball shoes so that I wasn't the only kid on the team who didn't have junky shoes, but I had some pretty sweet Nikes rocking them because I worked hard at his house mowing the lawn and raking the lawn so that I could get these basketball shoes.
Wait, this is all making sense now. This is why you have such love for so many sneakers.
This is true.
Okay.
We might have to show his shoes each time he's here.
Oh, man.
We can't today,
No,
but
I will. One by one, I'll just bring them up. I'm not a full-blown sneakerhead, but I do love some sneakers for sure.
You do.
And my grandmother was a person, going back to her, that just was constant in our lives, worked really hard, and loved us. When I think about hospitality, I just think of how she opened her home to anyone and everyone. And that goes all the way back to my great-grandmother, where every Sunday, our family would kind of just find ourselves at my great-grandmother's house, and she's providing meals and food for all of us who maybe didn't have enough food in our homes or maybe didn't have a lot of money. I think of growing up in a family that gave away cars. This is not like Oprah, though. Oh. So these were not like Mustangs and Expeditions. And these were like somebody had a car that was hanging on its last limb, but you were about to get a new one, but somebody needed a car. So it's like, hey, let's not sell this. Let's give this to another family member who's getting ready to drive or their car just broke down. And all of those moments were hard, but all of those moments were really shaping and forming to who I would become.
So you were really involved in what we call a care community before you knew what care communities were, right?
Absolutely.
And so people were wrapping around you and others in your community that were in need, and they did it just because they saw the need and stepped in. And that's really what we want, right? We want to take agencies that know the needs and tell the churches who want to know the needs, and then Restoration 225 steps in the middle. And it's always our hope that we connect so that little Logans can be taken care of.
I don't know what the world will do with a lot of little Logans. I cannot tell you.
Oh, but there are a lot of little Mabes.
There are.
Oh, yeah. Let's jump into that.
So let's transition to our story really quickly. My wife and I, we moved to San Diego in 2010 to be part of a church. And after a few years, the Lord began to stir on us to do something. And so we didn't know anybody in our circle of influence or our church even who was doing foster care. But we decided to show up to a meeting and learn about this thing called foster care. Now, we went to a few different meetings with a few different agencies, and we landed on this place called Angels, which is coincidentally in the Lord's sovereignty where we all met. We were all from Angels.
But we didn't really hang out with
we didn't.
you back
we didn't
in the
know
day.
each
We
other.
didn't know each other.
Yeah, it would have been too much.
I didn't know Logan at all. I knew Lanny. We did meet and we hung up, but Logan, never met you.
Yeah. We were like in the same room at the same time, but never saw each other. It's crazy.
It is crazy.
And just to give context, it was like galas and different events and things like that.
Yes.
But we went to a meeting. We heard all of the need. There was probably 40 people plus in this meeting. We couldn't even find a place to sit. They tell you all the good, the bad, and a lot of the ugly that happens in foster care. So we come back for the next meeting and there's 4 couples. And that's real life. If you're ever thinking about foster care and you go to a meeting, that's what's going to happen. There's like all these people like, I want to do something good. And then all of a sudden they're like, but by the way, there's a lot of, and then they start to list all the things that could happen.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden you are coming back, if you decide to come back, and you are in a room that's much smaller and there are seats available. And then they're going to continue to tell you real life and some of the difficult things that maybe you're up against. But for whatever reason, and I'll say for whatever reason, both it was God, but also my wife, because I was a typical guy who was like, I don't know if we want to do this.
See?
So I can say this on behalf of men. Most of us are like, no, not what I had in mind. And my wife was kind of nudging me saying, hey, we should do this. And really what came about for the both of us was thinking about, again, how many people shaped me, how many people who were not my biological parents, who added to my story. And so, of course, my biological parents were involved at some level. And so I just shouting out too, but God used a lot of different people in my life. And so we said yes, and we began to foster. Our first placement, our eyes were big, our hearts were full.
Right.
We had all the dreams that you can dream about being a foster parent and bringing in these kids into your home, and just how much love you have and all the good you're doing. We were both very naive. Really hard part of the story of foster care, you don't always get the right information. There's a lot of complexities. There's a lot that they've gone through. We knew that intellectually. I just don't think that we grasped that when we were taking these kids in. So we went to pick up our 2 kids from a local emergency shelter where they were at, and they didn't have anything. They had the clothes on their back, and we brought them home. This is a side story that we'll get into later, but we had a crib and we had a car seat. And so our church jumped in as a care community and said, we need to get them another crib. We need to get them a car seat, because we couldn't bring them home without these specific items. And so people jumped into action and brought those for us so that we could bring these kids home. We put them in bed after what was probably a really long night, a really long day for them. And they woke up the next morning to a couple of strangers. And if you can imagine, just a lot of nervous energy. Yeah. We realized that at that season of life, how unprepared our house was for children. We were putting all the picture frames up. Our house became empty. All these things that we'd organized to look really good was pre-children, and then children got in the house, and they were just running with nervous energy. There was some screaming involved, not from us, but from the kids. And we went to a friend's house, to our pastor's house, and met them that next morning, and my wife just cried all morning. Mm-hmm. They brought us in and made us muffins, and we got to sit down and play with the kids to try to figure out, what does day 2 look like?
Because it's a lot, right? You go from a home without children in it, and then all of a sudden you have children in it, and it's not for an evening, right? I'm babysitting, or even for, they're gone, their parents are gone for 3 days, we can get through this. No, they're yours right now for, an undetermined amount of time. And so it can be very much overwhelming. And also, being honest, as we're always going to be on this podcast, the children arrive and have sometimes needs that you weren't ready, you didn't know they would have. Absolutely. Maybe they don't sleep through the night like a child of their age might otherwise. And you're kind of starting, Jeff from Angels, who's the executive there, he always says you're kind of starting with the story not at the end, but like in the middle. Yeah. And you're trying to figure out what happened prior to when you entered the story.
Yeah, you have little to no information. You're just taking these kids on and you think, I'm doing a good thing. But you have no concept of the kind of traumas they've experienced or what their life was like or their rhythms. Every single placement that we took in, we were the first to our knowledge of creating like a bedtime routine with them.
Sure.
And so like, we're going to go to bed at this time and we're going to do these things. Like, all of this was very new for every child that we brought into our home. And it was new for us too, because we are in a unique space where we didn't have any biological children, any children at all, no child raising experience to that point. And we took on some very complex cases, and but all of them were good. All of them are good. And I keep going back to Genesis 50, verse 20, and God meant it for good. Even every child that went home, there were moments that we didn't agree, but that was not our job. That was not our role. We did all that we could to protect, love, and care for those kids while we had them, and many of them went home. But what I could see each time is God not just doing something through us in them, but God using them in us, in reforming and reshaping our heart. Whether there was a stereotype we held or a judgment that maybe was kind of the curtain was pulled back on it, that maybe we didn't know we felt, but then all of a sudden we thought, man, this is a lot here. This is a lot. And I want to say another thing. Every child and every placement we had, I was ready to quit after every single one of them. Every single one of them. I was like, okay, we can never do this again. And as you heard me say in the beginning, we had 12 kids, 7 placements because we had some sib sets. And all of a sudden we would wait like a month. We would pray and my wife would say, hey, let's do this again. And then we would open our hearts and open our home and we would do it again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that went on for a while until we got to, at that time, we were in a place where we really felt like we wanted to have a family of our own. And this is part of our journey and part of the story that we share often. It was that we didn't know this in the beginning, but we found that we were struggling through infertility. So we didn't foster to build a family. We fostered to help families and found out along the way that we were struggling through infertility. And there became a point where we were loving these kids and we thought, okay, we're helping these families is so good, but we really want to start a family. So we began to just pray and pursue adoption and some different things and a lot of different storylines for another time. But we got a call for 2 children and we said, I don't know. I'm tired.
Because had you always done one before? You just had one?
No,
Okay.
we had several sibling sets.
You did? Okay.
But we were just kind of tired.
Gotcha.
And it was good things, but it was hard because so many times these kids would go home at Christmas. There were 3 placements that went home like 2 weeks before Christmas. So we're this young couple with Christmas gifts under the tree. Many times, every time actually, we would wrap them up and give them to the birth parents.
Yeah.
And hey, bless your kids. Yeah. And then we would come home to an empty tree right before Christmas. Talk about like ripping your heart out. It was awful. And we would cry and we would like go to church and we were like, and then you have to answer like, where are those kids at? You're like, they're not here, And we got to this place where we were just really tired and we kind of looked at each other as we we received this call and said, okay, we can do this. And sometimes while social workers and agencies don't know, they're like, this is going to be hopefully just a really quick case. And we thought, let's help this mom. Let's help this family. And that placement went 2.5 years and was some of the hardest, most life-shaping moments for us as a family because those 2 also became 2 of our forever kids, our oldest 2 kids. And then in the middle of all of that, we had a 1 and a 2-year-old. And through a series of really unique, supernatural circumstances, we were placed with another child who was a 13-day-old baby. Mm-hmm. So we have our oldest 2 who are 1 and 2. They have the same biological mother. Mm-hmm. And then we have a whole nother child with different biological parents altogether who's 13 days old. So it was like we had triplets. We had like triplets in a moment. And we had no idea what was going to happen with them all. But we said yes. And Elizabeth also became our forever child. So 3 kids moving forward and pastoring church, 3 kids with a lot of needs and a lot of energy. And we went on through life and we thought, okay, this is the family that the Lord has formed for us and it's good. And then 2020 hit. You guys remember 2020? I think that's probably cliche. Everybody says that like, okay, that's a dumb statement. We all lived through, we know.
Yeah.
But because of 2020 in COVID, there were a lack of foster parents, resource parents out here in California, in case anybody from California is listening, because they're like, if you're anywhere else in the country, like we know what a foster parent is. Out here, we're called resource parents. Yes. And so we were relicensed and we opened our home again and we took on 2 more placements for about 6 months each of small little children while we had our family of 3 adopted children. And I thought, is this going to wreck them? Is this going to be bad for them? But it was so good because they were older and because they'd experienced the things they were experiencing. I think it was healing in some ways for them to do what they did and care for little babies. One of the things that's happened to me multiple times is people come up and ask me and had asked me, what's it like to have children in foster? And at that time, before our children, I was like, I don't know. I would imagine you should have a conversation with them. And we talk about that through some of the agencies as well and in the training. But truthfully, every kid's different. You don't know how they're going to respond.
Right.
And then for us, when we adopted 3 kids, and at that point, our youngest was only 5, I thought, how are they going to respond to this? And so we just prayed, and all of them were all in for it. And
so what count are we at now, Logan?
that was 3 kids, but then we had
You said what
3
count are we
kids, and then we had a foster placement.
Okay, that's where we're at. Yeah.
So after we had a couple placements in the middle of our second placement, my wife, after 14 years, found out that she was pregnant. So
I remember that. I remember that call.
Quick thing, let me just tell you on here, because since we're doing a podcast, we get to say all the real things that people never say. People say this to us all the time.
Yeah.
Oh, that always happens that way. It doesn't.
It does
actually.
not. It actually
Statistically,
doesn't.
it doesn't happen.
Right.
But in case you ever meet somebody who's fostering and then gets pregnant, it's not like...
That's Logan.
Yeah.
That's Logan and his beautiful bride.
Yeah.
It happens to them.
It happened to us, but that's not something that happens for everyone. And I think we just say that because part of this podcast, the CareCast, is because we care, is to have these caring type conversations to help people think through, oh, I might have said that before insensitively in a way that I just didn't know. And we've gotten to do a lot of educating to our families and our friends. And that's one of those things that comes up all the time.
Here's another one. What do your real kids think about?
Oh,
Yes. What are your real kids? Well, we have now 5 real kids. 3 happen to be adopted and 2 were birthed. But I have 5 real kids. They're all real human beings,
Right.
with
They
all
eat.
real needs. And no, they don't all look like me, but they're all 5 are real kids.
Yeah. And you know that people don't mean
Yes.
harm by saying that, but they mean, they maybe don't know the term biological or whatever.
Absolutely.
But we are here on this podcast just to bring some enlightenment to those, because we know that obviously we're inviting those that are walking this world with us, but also other people who don't know anything about it, that just want to learn about it. And so we want to put those things out so that people know all of our children that live in our home, and I would even venture to say children that we have returned to their families, they're still in part, I think of them as my child. It doesn't mean I am mothering them. It doesn't mean that they live with us every day. It doesn't mean that I even talk to them anymore should that family not want that, right? But we cared for them as they were our own. And so they will always remain in my mind as one of my children.
Yeah, we pray. And for many years, we had pictures of our family with each kids. And then as our kids were adopted, on the walls, they were like, is that my brother or sister? They were just like, we would talk about these things because it was an open conversation in our home. Of course, that we are a multiracial family, so that opens discussion more than some families that maybe have the same racial makeup as their adopted or fostered children. I think it made things a little easier for us at times. So there was no sense of like secrecy. It wasn't like, oh, like we don't look the same, right?
You mean it's not like with my husband, who is Caucasian from Indiana, right? And he walks in with our forever son, who's Mexican, and they're like, oh. And then I walk in, who's Filipino, and they're like, oh yeah, okay. Maybe her genes are stronger, right? Like you don't know. You don't have those questions for you and your family.
No, we don't have as many for them. And that's good because we always had an open dialogue, and we wanted to say as many things as we could to the kids in a way that was helpful and heartfelt to lead them to like truth. We never wanted to have a space where they couldn't ask us any questions. And for parents too, if you are opening your home as like a foster parent and you move into adoption, guess what? Some of those conversations are hard and they're uncomfortable. But we felt it was part of our role as their parents to be as open and honest as we could in an age-appropriate way to say the things that their heart could bear in that moment.
Yeah.
And as they age, to be able to kind of peel back the onion, as Donkey says in Shrek, right? We're all an onion. We've got layers to us. And so we'd peel back the next layer of the onion and say, okay, let me share a little bit more of this with you. So that they knew a little bit more because we wanted them to know their story also.
And you're still navigating that. I mean, they're quite young,
Yeah.
right? Yeah. So
Our kids at this point, by the way, we had one more. So we have
yes,
five kids
sorry.
now. I'm not like shortchanging my baby. We have a 9-month-old baby now. So lacking sleep. We're doing all this stuff. In July, I'll have a 12-year-old and a 1-year-old. And so for the rest of my life, I'm going to be parenting. So you said experts on here. I think by the time we're all said and done, I should be an expert on parenting. No,
I think so.
I will still be like, I'm not really sure what to do about that.
Well, but isn't that parenting in general?
It is.
Right.
It is.
Every year, every month, sometimes every week, it's something new, something challenging, especially when you have adopted or you're currently fostering.
I always say it's major leagues of parenting when you're fostering or adopting because, and I think I can say that because I have parented, biological children, and then we moved to parenting adopted child. But I also am adopted, which that's a story for later. But my point was when I said that one time, it made the person I said it to, she's like, oh, so this is supposed to be a little bit more difficult, right? We're having 90, 100 per hour balls thrown at our house. Hopefully not really, but the pitcher is throwing the ball at you and you have done the work and strengthened your parenting skills to be able to hit that ball, right? Mm-hmm. And do you hit it all the time? No, because we all know in the major leagues, I love sports, by the way, but like a batting average is really pretty crummy when you're a good batter. Like if you look at their, you know what I mean? If you look at how many they actually hit, so the analogy extends, and it's really a good one because it means that it's hard. It's difficult. We always say children coming from difficult places, right? Or maybe a harder beginning, and how parenting that child can be more challenging if we're just being real. And I say that as someone who personally was adopted. I'm certain that it was more difficult to raise me than it might have been to raise a biological child. Is that always the case? No, it is not. But often it can be. And that's not to discourage anyone. It's to be real. And that's what I want the CareCast to be, right? I want us to always go back to what is real and what we've experienced and all of our guests. So you left off with your baby. So you've got a 12-year-old and a 9-month-old and a few in between.
Yeah. So we have 5 children right now. And one of the questions that happens to us all the time is, are you done? And I say this in complete genuineness and love. I'm like, we didn't plan for this. This was part of the Lord's plan. I go back to Genesis 50 again, and God meant it for good. Mm-hmm. There is not a part of my life to this point that I can think of that I planned out that worked out the way that I had originally imagined. But for me, and I'm only speaking for me as a Christian, as a pastor, the Lord has written a better story for us.
That's good.
I always say I wouldn't have chosen the path that I've chosen, but I'm so glad that God did.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Who wants to choose pain?
Oh,
right? We were talking about that earlier, where it's like pain and, purpose with your pain, right?
Oh.
But when we can reflect back to our stories and go, man, I would have never imagined that happening. Would I imagine the 3 of us sitting here at Coastal Cast? Yes, maybe I did. But here we are, right? One thing I wanted to ask you too, Logan, is stepping in and being part of growing Restoration 225 and maybe even diving into the 225 on restoration. Can you speak into that?
Yeah, let me go back one more moment to share how this has all culminated to this moment too. As I said earlier, I used my family and the people, aunts, grandparents, others, Tony, my neighbor, but then it was the church. It was the church that stepped into my story. We didn't go to church all the time, but there was a church that we frequented in different seasons, and I found myself in high school really getting involved there with a youth pastor who just cared for me deeply. He's only like 5 years older than me. He's like a big brother. And not just him, but many other men and women at the church that just loved me through all of my imperfection. If you can imagine me now, take me back to 16 years old with a 1992 Dodge Dynasty and hubcap spinners.
What year was that?
I graduated in 2003, but I got into church really deeply in about 2001. So 2001, just start to think, go look up today, 2001's greatest hits, and I was listening to them.
Well, I was just going to say, was that your Backstreet Boys phase?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, definitely. Ninth grade is when I dyed my tips. I had puka shell necklaces, and I did my best Justin, not Bieber. This generation's Bieber. Mine was Timberlake, right?
Oh,
okay.
And so
JT.
JT. We're
all
not
know who
endorsing anything, just so we are clear on the CareCast. We're not endorsing anything or anyone. We're just saying in that season, I love me some JT. And those 2000s hits. But the church became a safe place for me. And there began to be, for the first time in my life, some people that, and I want to be careful to say this, but in all of my family, I didn't have a lot of people that really had a healthy, strong, Christ-centered marriage. I'll never forget going to my youth pastor's house and knocking on his door because he lived right next to the church in a parsonage at one point, and he and his wife were a young couple. Yeah. And we started hanging out. Like I was playing basketball. We'd bring friends over there. Basketball was a big part of my life. Sports a big part of my life, and I love it. And it was part of what got me into the church. And saying, "Hey, what are you doing today?" And he said, "We're going on a date." And being rocked like, bro, you're married.
Like, why are you going on a date?
Right. Who goes on dates when they're married? You won. You got the trophy, dude. And so thinking how shocking that was for me, because I couldn't really at that moment think of any adult couples who were like going to church together and who had been married and stayed together and who were going on dates. Yeah. I was thinking, but okay. And then watching later on when he and others had kids and how they parented their kids and went to games and cheered them on and encouraged them. And more importantly, that's where I found my faith in Christ. Mm. And it just shaped all of who I was. Now, I was a work in progress and still am to this day. So I am not ashamed of that. I am still a work in progress.
We all are, brother.
Yeah.
But I became a pastor after becoming a Christian, in those early moments in my life that shaped me into who I am today, gave me a different perspective. Because when I would read the Bible and when I thought of my own life, I thought sometimes, and again, not a criticism, there are a lot of churches out there and a lot of Christians that really just simply don't look like Christ. They don't look like Jesus. And the churches weren't always loving and they weren't always doing anything for people in need. And there were people all around them. Now, I was an exception to that rule and many others in our church. These people loved us and cared for us in spite of all of our shortcomings, which was so good. And my youth pastor and those youth leaders. But the only context I had then after surrendering my life to wanting to be a pastor, which we keep saying on this podcast is like a whole nother story for another day, was I wanted to reach people like my friends and family. And I wanted to serve a city and a community that looked much different than most of the churches that I had seen. And so fast forward, we had been blessed I met my wife in college. I could say so many things about her, but she has been the one the Lord has used most in my life to help me to say yes to these really hard things, to say yes to foster care. When the introduction came between Lanny and Lisa and myself about R225 in the very beginnings, I was a little hesitant because I thought, this is not my thing. And my wife had to be like, are you kidding me? Like, they're looking for somebody who knows ministry, who's a pastor, who's fostered. This is basically like a whole job that's built around you. Like, they're looking for you. And it took my wife to nudge me in that. It was my wife that prayed for me and with me as I would say no and then take on the next foster kid. And we did that for each other many times, but there was a lot more times early on as it pertained to ministry and what we're doing now that the Lord used my wife in. But we were able to pastor in a few places and then landed here, like I said, in 2010 and now pastoring a church. When I met Restoration 225, we were just kind of in this place and praying through what the Lord had on the horizon. And R225 said, and that was in March of 2020. Before that was a meeting at Panera. We are high rollers here.
Yeah, and you had a specific cookie that you wanted.
Oh, I love the cookie, the sugar cookie with like the frosting on top. There's a place, shout out Buckeye Bakery, Mansfield, Ohio. What? If you are watching this, you got to go to Buckeye. I hope it's still open. It may not be open, but it was phenomenal. And there were these cookies when I was a kid, and I never found any that were like it. Then I come and Panera has them. And I'm like, of course, right? Big restaurant, big business takes whatever secret cookie recipe.
Secret.
And they just like multiply it for profit. I'm kidding.
Yeah.
But yeah, I wanted this cookie at Panera. And we had this discussion and we left. And I came back around through the conversations with my wife, and she was like, you should say yes. And so I started off with like 5 hours a week, which turned very quickly into like 30 hours a week at that time.
Right.
With Restoration 225. And in the very beginning, if you don't know what we do, we help to just educate, equip, and empower the church to do the work around foster care. Because as Lanny said, we believe that every child deserves a caring community. And a lot of times there's churches that just need a little nudge. They need somebody to help walk them through what to do. Or they're already doing things and you're like, you could be doing this. You could be doing this for the kids and the families in your community. And you want me to share a little bit about that early stages?
Yeah, I would love to.
Okay. So 2020 starts. I am pastoring as an associate pastor at our church, and I get to step into Restoration 225, which was an amazing time. COVID hits. This goes back to COVID. And when we started taking on other foster placements again. So there's a lot, if you are reading into the story, there's a lot of things happening all the time in the Mabe household. It's like, we're working, we got 3 kids, let's take on foster kids in a new business called Restoration 225, which is not a business, it's a ministry. And we have really no other person or organization like it around here that we could look to and learn from. So we're looking outward, like, who is doing this around the country? COVID hits, families need help, and we start through our relationships with agencies and even the county. People are saying, hey, can you help? And I'm like, this is crazy. But in the beginning, we only had a handful of churches that could do the work. So we started old school cold calling, like a call center, like, hey, is this such and such pastor? And they'd be like, yes. And I'm like, hey, I'm with Restoration 225. I'm Pastor Logan. There's a family down the street from you. Would you be willing to help? And they were like, what? Well, most of these churches, they didn't know yet, but we're all built on programs and not just people. Mm-hmm. So when COVID hit, there was still a call and a mission that Christ has called us to, which is to serve people, to love people in need. But now, as their doors are closed, they didn't really know what to do. And so we were giving an opportunity for them to step out and do something. And out of that, very quickly, we went from like 7 churches to like 50 churches to like 70 churches that were on board. And we were just like racing through. And of course, just to be clear, yes, we would go back and we did all the training with these churches and with these care communities at the time that would wrap around these families and provide really just meals and care calls and prayer. Yeah. We're like, anything else that you want to do, but here's the baseline that you've got to do for like 6 to 8 weeks. And it would end up being so much more because they would build these relationships with these families and they would decide, 8 weeks is not enough. Yeah. And they would just keep helping and helping and helping. And out of that, we saw so many amazing things that we didn't even dream up. These were not our ideas. Families that needed help with education. Maybe grandmothers were raising their grandkids and they needed tutors, but they didn't have help, or schools online. We had churches were like, hey, we'll do online tutoring for free. We had a grandmother that was going through some legal issues. And we had another church that said, we have a lawyer in the church that's going to help them with citizenship, with paperwork, with all these things that they're struggling through. I mean, it was amazing to see the church step up. But again, that goes all the way back to my story and how it was people and then the church that stepped into my story. And then as I became a Christian and then as a pastor, I was like, I want to do this. Mm-hmm. When I read the Gospels, when I read the story of Jesus, I see more of this than some of the other churches that I had experienced. And I was like, I want to be more like that. So
that's so good.
No, I love it. I love it. I think we're going to land the plane at this point. I think it's
Barbara, do we need to land the plane? Are you doing this
okay?
yet?
We're landing the plane, and but because it was a good place to stop. Otherwise, we keep on going. But I think we're going to stop now. But I just am so, as always, inspired by your story, Logan, and your continue following on what the Lord puts on your heart and the guidance that He provides and the people that He's put into your life. Like, I've heard the story before, but when you really think about where you came from and all the different spots where you stopped and learned and heard, and then, and I know that, like I said, you were an angry kid and there's frustrations in your life and hard things, but you kept pushing forward and God was there for you. So thank you for being here today. And Logan is going to be here a lot. Like, I think Logan and I are going to kind of, we will have you very often, Lana.
Hey,
very often.
I love surrounding myself with talkers,
yes,
educators, yes.
All right.
So
can I say one more thing? I think for anyone listening, out of the story today, the thing I want them to take away is that no act of service is insignificant. And we might not always get to see the fullness that we've shared today in our stories and in my life, but I think it's really important that seeing the people around you is the first step, and then doing something. That's a phrase that we use around here, and you'll hear more often.
Yeah.
Do something. And out of that, goodness, you have no idea what God might use for the fullness of that life.
And you may never know what it meant to that person, I mean, I think we all have had people in our lives that have done something and taken that step, and we maybe never can thank them. And that's okay, but it mattered. It mattered what they did, and they don't necessarily have to know. It's great when we can make the dots connect, but so I am going to sign us off here. Ready? All right, let's do it. All right, so we want you to follow us and tune in every single week. You can follow us at Restoration 225 on all social media, or go to the web at restoration225.org. And as we say here, go care for one today.